Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Our sermon topic is how to drop your conspiracy theory. So, first, of course, I should make a little statement that I do not mean to make a false equivalency between the twists of mind that we get stuck on that I'll be talking about today and harmful conspiracy theories, like if your team doesn't win the sports ball tournament today, that you'll storm the Capitol to stop the steal or something like that. So I do not mean to make an equivalency between these two things. But what I do want to tell you is that what's happening in our brains when, like I shared earlier, you think your wife has hid the whole thing of vegan powered bars they had branched chain amino acids in it. They were just these great power bars that I got from the store, and I thought she hid them from me. And we get stuck in these ruts of the mind. The same thing is happening in my brain when that happens to me. Who hid the remote? As happens when you think that your sports ball team actually won and they're covering it up. It's the same pattern in your brain. So the more we learn about either of them, the more we learn about both of them, and we can help ourselves out of dangerous and constricting holes of the mind that we may have dug ourselves into. This is very important to use because we hold as one of our principles the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And this is actually what we're doing when we form a conspiracy theory. We're attempting to search for truth and meaning. The value that we UUs hold is actually the same value that's being held by some people who act in ways that don't meet our UU values. One of our 6 sources as well are humanist teachings that tell us to not erect these icons of the mind, but actually to use our reason, to use the scientific method, to use logic to find out what is true and what is false. So all of these are things that we will be exploring today. Why do we make and hold on to conspiracy theories? Either the big harmful ones that can lead us to harm others in our search for justice, or the little ones that just make our spouses and best friends uncomfortable when we subject them to them? Well, it's actually a little bit simple. The simple part of it is complexity. We don't like complexity. We want to make things much more simple. But the problem is we live in a very, very complex world. When we concoct and get stuck in these theories and these ruts of the mind that don't allow us to take other perspectives, we're kind of doing like a bad version of Occam's razor. We think, well, the simplest solution must be true. And the mind really likes that. And we can hold on to those simple solutions to in spite of other evidence that may present itself. So complexity is cumbersome, and this is why we need heuristics, which is a fancy way to say shortcut, and it's one of my favorite words of 2021, heuristics. If we're going to get through life with any efficiency, we need shortcuts and heuristics. Okay, so how perception works. This part is really pretty fun. If you look around, whatever scene you're in your room or outside or wherever you are, there are trillions of bits, some say. I got this from a cute book called Mind Real, M-I-N-D-R-E-A-L, like it has the same last name as me. Trillions of bits of information coming at you. Your sensory apparatus and your brain can only integrate billions of bits. Your sensory apparatus and your brain can only integrate billions of bits. So, these are numbers that we can't really wrap our minds around, but you got to think about, like, billions is like Jeff Bezos' net worth, and trillions is like the US military budget. So vast, and then most of us are thinking like, well, what about those of us in the 40K a year bracket? You got anything for me, Reverend Fajun? Well, yes, actually, because your memory is much more like a middle class salary. So you've got the US military budget worth of bits of information. I hope this analogies work at all. I just came up with them yesterday. Trillions of bits of information coming at you. You can't integrate trillions of bits. And so the sensory apparatus filters that to billions. And then what we remember is chunked down to like thousands, tens of thousands, right, to a working person's salary. Okay, that means that we can actually never, even if we wanted to, we can never see the world as it is. There's just too much world out there. So our brains were made to chunk the world, hopefully effectively, to chunk the world, the information coming at us effectively, so that we can get through life with some degree of efficiency. Okay, how do we do this? Well, there's perceptual selectivity, and this, in case you want to look this up later, I'm just jazzed about this, so I hope it doesn't bore you, but your reticular activating system is a part of your brain they call the gatekeeper, and it determines actually what gets in. This is what turns off your limbs when you go to sleep and make sure you're not like sensing a bunch of stuff while you're asleep. And similarly, this is how cognitive priming works. You can prime the mind to be aware of certain things, and those perceptions get in more easily than other perceptions. Ruh-roh, can you see where the problem might be here? This problem comes up actually in how we train police officers and members of our military. We prime people to look for threats, and it's kind of, there's a big perceptual selectivity. The responses that are online are severely limited by the priming that we've undergone. Then we're often not perceiving life directly. We're often perceiving life through our memories, right? You know, it takes a lot of meditation to be in the present moment. I don't know if you have noticed. And so we're often not being here now, Ram Dass, we're being here recently. And then not only does our reticular activating system filter, perceptually selective, but our limbic system, which is the emotional and survival part of our brain, determines what memories get drawn from short-term into long-term, again, largely based on this prioritization system that's all wrapped up in your emotions. So the world we see isn't actually the world we see, it's the world we see through a filter of our emotions, of our cognitive priming, of our history, of what we expect. The brain's built this way, supposedly, to be effective. We've got a negativity bias that worked to keep our ancestors out of danger. We've got a my side bias that worked to make primate bands more cohesive. But in a world like ours, where we seem to have raised the level of complexity through our global interconnectivity, through all the things there are to know, things like negativity bias can be extremely detrimental to our health. Things like my side bias can make our thinking much sloppier than it needs to be in order to tackle the wicked problems that confront us modern humans. Another way to put this would be that humans are masters at shortcuts, masters at pattern recognition, or even that we're master storytellers. The problem is that our brains can take this too far, seeing patterns where none exist. Some theorists, I think I got this from Reza Aslan, some theorists even think this may be where the first religious impulses came from. That early humans, we have this thing in our brain where human brains and perceptual apparatus tend to see faces. We anthropomorphize the world. And so some theorists believe that in twilight, the actual evening time for early hominids, we looked at different trees and stuff and saw faces in them. I mean, maybe they found weird mushrooms or plants or something too, who knows? And that may have been a basis for animistic beliefs in our ancient history, that we thought, oh, there's grandmother spirit in the tree. Oh, there's, Uncle Joe in the bush. So I don't know what you see, though. It's usually grandmother spirit and Uncle Joe when I'm looking at trees and bushes in the twilight. So we are master pattern makers. Personally, I think a feeling of numinous meaning or even animism is pretty fun and harmless, but our brains then can get stuck on their ideas and utilize them in the ongoing campaign of reducing complexity, often at the expense of truth, good relationships, and happiness. So like Mark Twain or whoever it turns out said it ain't so much what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know that just ain't so. We make up patterns, and sometimes those patterns aren't true, but we fixate on them because our brains are attempting to find simple solutions so that we can operate efficiently in life. If the story we're making up about what's going on activates our survival circuitry, right? If it's a scary story, if it's a story that invokes our sense of justice and right wrong of the great, what do they call, Manichaean, of the great dualistic universe of good and evil, if the story we're thinking invokes that, it can actually, the pattern maker, story maker up in the top of our brain can grab the lizard down in the bottom of our brain and invoke this thing called cognitive dissonance, which is where you wrap a belief with your sense of survival, such that if someone questions your story, you feel like you're going to die. And all of the fight, flight, and freeze technology that's built in comes online in the defense of your story, which may or may not be true. We're built to make up stories and then fight for them to the death because that helped our cute monkey ancestors to survive. But it's not helping us to survive. When the stories can grab this low road circuitry, the limbic low road in our brain, it induces this survival response, and our brain, our breath, our inner speech, and our body are all doing the same thing. Right? Our brain it's making up pictures of all of the good and evil battles that are going on. And then we tell ourselves a story in our speech, our breath matches that, and then our body pumps out all this cortisol and adrenaline and stuff. And we call that congruence. You're all lined up. And the problem with congruence is that it's so powerful that we mistake it for true. Congruence of the mind, body, and breath are so powerful that we mistake it for being true. Obviously, conspiracy theories are so hot right now. It's a hot topic. I try to make my sermon titles align with the hot topics of the time, you know, just to do what's important to us, maybe get some new people watching the stream, I don't know. But I wanted also to give this sermon on how to drop your conspiracy theory, again, mindful of false equivalency. I wanted to give this sermon near Valentine's Day, because I think many of us have experienced this phenomenon in relationships. Have you ever had this in a relationship with your parents or with a close friend? You concoct an entire story about what they've done, their intentions in doing it, what it means for the future of the two of you, only to find out a few hours or a few weeks later that the whole thing was completely made up. Like our friend said earlier, it's a relief. It's also totally embarrassing. But this is something that we do, and it can, if we don't know that this is possible and how to get ourselves out of it, it can make our relationships and our lives much harder than they need to be. Relationships with emotional intelligence are always aware that this can happen, that we can get caught in our stories, that we can get congruent around our stories, that we can project our stories out as if they were the truth and be almost unable to get the heck out of the rut we've got ourselves into mentally. Humans are natural storytellers. If we want to survive and thrive in relationships, we'll need to understand that these stories can go horribly wrong, and they will, and we'll need to do repair. But first, we should also learn how to drop it. So this is my sales pitch to you for why it's important to learn how to drop your conspiracy theory. Sound good? Would you like to buy the main product of how to actually drop my 3-step method, how to actually drop it? Okay, here we go. We got a couple minutes left. Let's get the 3-step method. Okay, step 1 is called get out of red light. Get out of red light. This is terminology I learned from a communication instructor. And, you know, they use a red light, yellow light, green light for what type of communication is possible, what to do in each of these different states. Red light means like our survival circuitry has been activated. So how do you recognize that you're in a red light? Well, the first thing, having Reverend Fudgeon tell you this code word actually makes it easier. I've just cognitively primed you. You can now be on the lookout. Is this a red light or a yellow light? You've been primed, y'all. This is a beneficial priming. It's not all bad. But you also have to know, well, what does that mean? And here's the test. Can you compassionately take the other party's perspective? Can you compassionately take the other party's perspective? If you can't, what this means is that you're in what we would call a red light. And so even if you don't feel like, that's a pretty high bar, actually. You may not feel like you're holding on to a story or a projection or something like that, but when someone comes with an alternate version of the facts, if it's impossible for you to empathize with them, I don't mean agree, but if it's impossible for you to see things from their vantage point, it means that you've activated the circuitry from which my side bias, false dichotomy, all of these problematic heuristics in your brain come from. You've activated your survival circuitry that says, I must defend my views at the expense of yours. You're in a red light, and red light means, okay, stop, but I'm going to say pause. Red light means pause. Okay. Emotional maturity means the ability to empathize with other perspectives. If you can't do that, it's a sign you've been dropped into your limbic low road. You are letting your emotional and survival circuitry make all the perceptual choices rather than the prefrontal cortex high road. This is what we want on. This is the part that the high road is the part of your brain that allows for creativity, for abstract and tangential thinking, the kind of thinking that we use to solve intractable problems. So even though your story may be more right, it may be more factual, if you can't take the other's perspective, it's a sign that you're using the most limited part of your hominid brain. Okay, so we got to get ourselves out of red light. And the last thing, even if you're laying out a great string of logic, if you're in the limbic low road, you're likely to succumb to all the biases that we utilize to try to reduce complexity. Confirmation bias, my side bias, availability heuristic, and the like. Okay, step one means you got to get out of red light. Step two is that means you need emergency empathy. You need emergency empathy. So you can emerge from red light and see the other's perspective. Emergency. Okay. I did that on the spot, though. Pretty good joke for just right on the spot. Emergency empathy means we must find a way to pause from our stories and projections and hone in primarily on what we are feeling and needing. Pause from our stories and projections, hone in on what we're feeling and needing. So for example, where's my power bars? She must have hid them. I was going to eat that before my workout with the branched chain. I just been researching how good that could be for you. Oh, why did... I need to pause from, she did it to me. I know what happened. And go to, I'm feeling frustrated because I need food. I'm feeling angry because I need order. I'm feeling sad because I need cooperation. And here's the thing that's really weird. Even if my story isn't true, the feelings are real. I really am feeling angry. I'm feeling it about something I've totally made up, but the feelings are real. So trying to just like snap myself out of it won't work. I have to actually interface with the real fear, the real frustration, the real anger, the real worry that's happening right now. And they're tapping into real needs. I really am hungry. I really do need a better system of where the power bars always go. Even though we just moved into a new house, I need order. These are real, and I can offer myself empathy for them. It's unfortunate that most people are not skilled enough to give you the empathy you need when you come at them in a triggered state. Wouldn't that be nice if you had concocted a story and then you come to your partner or your mother-in-law with it and you say, blah, 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 and they go, okay, honey, it sounds like you're feeling really angry, even though they know your story is totally made up. Like, wouldn't that be nice? Oh, babe, it sounds like you were longing for more comfort. Yeah, I was. Like, But newsflash, in case you haven't figured this out yet, most people are not that skillful. These are like Francis of Assisi skills here to like listen to people's feelings and needs when they're coming at you with their triggered survival story, right? And so we're going to have to master the skills of giving emergency empathy to ourselves. We're going to have to take that in hand because it's unlikely that anyone else out there is going to have the skill in the moment while you're coming at them with all that energy you come at them with. They're probably not going to be able to do it. So we don't just give empathy to our story as if it was true. We go to where the real leverage is. I feel blank because I'm longing for blank. And thus, I'm telling myself blank. We make up a story because those feelings and needs are so real that there has to be something to account for it. We have to take all the complexity of life and make it into something that our brains can work with our limited capacity that feels like it matches all the discomfort that's going on inside. We can deprogram ourselves from this if we go straight to where the juice is, the feelings and needs, the living energies of the moment, rather than our dead stories that we're defending to the death. Okay, that was all step one, actually. But that was step one, point B. Step two, open to these next ones are shorter though, don't worry. Open to the possibility that things might be much more complex than you think. So first, I'm feeling frustrated because I need this, and I'm in a story that this is happening, and then I open. Perhaps the answer is totally different than I'm imagining, and perhaps, and this should kind of like shake you up inside, perhaps things are so complex that I'm not going to come up with a good one-liner to explain them. It might just be that governments don't really work right, but they are in bed with corporate interests, but not all of them. And media is weird, but with journalistic criticism, you can learn to, like, it might just be that complex and that there's no one simple answer that can grab all of our survival circuitry and make it go. If we open to complexity, if we open to the fact that I don't know the whole picture, we're more likely to be operating from our prefrontal cortex, our creative, perspective-taking, empathetic brain than we are from the lizard brain that just wants to survive at all costs. Okay, when you can see, I'm telling myself, I'm in my story, blah, 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 you can start to look for real observations, not just the story, but actual evidence, and know that they might not make as neat a picture as your theory did. You can try this mantra. There's always more to the elephant. Like the story of the blindfolded wise men. One thinks it's a palm tree, and the other thinks it's a snake, and the other thinks it's a different kind of palm tree. There's always more to the elephant. And finally, this can allow you to raise your standards for evidence. When we recognize how easy it is to grab onto a story and forget about making real observations, we can start to look for evidence that is not so prone to story making. You don't have to only believe what gold standard peer-reviewed journals tell you about how to live your life. There may be a few studies about life, the universe, and everything that are still waiting for funding. But we might want to brush up on our evaluation of sources and avoiding logical fallacies. When we get out of red light and stop looking for simple solutions to complex problems, this becomes possible. And sometimes we have to live without being totally certain. Certainty is a great sign that you've locked yourself into a projection or a fundamentalism. First, we get ourselves comfortable with the possibility that we're wrong. Then we learn to take joy in living from our best, even without divine answers from on high. Okay, in closing, only if we can do this for ourselves, I believe, are we in a position to actually help someone else drop their conspiracy theory. Only if we can do this for ourselves are we in a position to help someone else drop their conspiracy theory. Because to do it successfully, you have to apply all the same steps to them. It certainly won't be easy, and many thinkers agree that there's no one way we know of that works every time to help people out of cognitive dissonance. But there's that complexity thing again. If we're not looking for the cult of the one true way, we can be okay with the fact that it's complex, and sometimes our empathy, our revoking the stories and coming from the needs and values, we can offer this to situations. Truth is, it's very hard to get someone to drop a conspiracy theory. There's the backfire effect of cognitive dissonance, where the more you try to talk someone out of something, the more they dig in. But the two things you can do are to see if you can help them out of red light by providing empathy. This means even if you can't fathom how they came up with their story, you can honor their feelings and needs because those are universal. People feel distrustful of their government, and it's not really hard for me to see how they came up with that feeling. People are scared of the course the world is taking. I cannot disagree with that personally. We long for certainty, transparency, mutuality, and fairness. Totally with you. Totally with you. Only by affirming and promoting our shared humanity can we soften the impact of this limbic low road, this tribalistic my side biased mindset, and have a chance at actual dialogue. I know, you'll probably say, Reverend Fajun, you don't know the type of people who are coming at me with their wild theories. And you're right, sometimes it goes far beyond our capacities, and in those moments you just need to take space, because if you go limbic low road, you have no chance of helping them, and now there's just two of you suffering. But there's a line of thinking that says there's a whole group of folks we should not disregard. These aren't anti-vaxxers. These are the vaccine hesitant, for example. All they need is someone to hear their fears and pull them forward into their prefrontal cortex in a shared space. But they can also be pushed further into the limbic low road by the way they're empathized with or not empathized with. We need to drop our theories about who a person is and judge them by their cover so we can actually meet them and serve them, and thus serve all of us. Okay, and even if you never minister this way to someone like this, you're going to need these skills for your wife, your mom, your best friend, because they're going to come to you one day or multiple days a week with a whole story out of nowhere about you that just ain't so. You have a choice to escalate the problem or to empathize. There's a magic in empathy. I've seen it in my own relationship and in couples I've coached. With enough of this magic substance, empathy, one can get to this mythical land where you finally ask the other person, would you be willing to hear my perspective? And they say, yes. So the work starts within by dropping our addiction to certainty and attachment to stories our fear makes us make up. We can not only be more alive and loving to our relationships, we might even become able to help others out of the holes that cognitive dissonance has dug them into. And that's something the world needs now more than ever.